director of Vancouver Moving Theatre, who is producing the festival with about 40 other partners. And our festival is a celebration of the great artists, art forms, cultures, issues, activists, and history and great stories of this neighborhood, which is the founding neighborhood of Vancouver, as probably most know. And we think of it as going from Burrard Inlet to the Falls Creek Flats, from around Canby to Clark, this whole neighborhood. The festival has over 100 events in 30 different locations. There are a number of exciting events that are happening today. I have a few program guides if any of you don't have them and would like to see them. And I just want to, delighted to welcome you to today's 1886 walking tour with one of our cultural treasures, Don Atkin, leading us on the walking tour. I go on them year after year because I'm always learning something new. Thank you.
Good morning, you fools. Oh dear. Anyway, the problem rain presents, of course, is brick streets are very noisy in the rain, so we will struggle to talk over the traffic this morning. But anyway, welcome to Gastown. This is, as Savannah mentioned, sort of the place where Vancouver begins. And in fact, Vancouver begins just over there, behind the statue of Gassy Jack, with a crude saloon right on the beach in the 1860s. And the reason for that is that way 3/4 of a mile is a sawmill. That's the Hastings Mill. That's cutting timber here in 1865. 1867, the first timber is shipped out and off to the New World. And then from there, Vancouver starts to grow. One small problem for the men that were employed at the mill manager didn't like you to drink or gamble on site. So if you're out in the middle of a coastal rainforest with nothing else to do, that's a really boring existence. So there's a fellow down in New Westminster who's tried his hand at a number of different things. He's running a saloon down in New West, and for whatever reason figures there's a new business opportunity out here on a beach on the edge of a forest. And he puts his wife, a dog, the cousin, the mother, and a barrel of whiskey in the rowboat, so the story goes, rows down the Fraser River and around and parks it right over here, leaves everybody down here, walks over to the mill and basically announces, I've got booze, you've got lumber. 2 days later we have a very crude little saloon, and within 3 years there are more men living around here than are living at the mill grounds. And so the colonial government sends a surveyor over to, in his words, take the chaos of the forest and bring order. So he lays out a 6-block town site. Carroll Street is our very first street, the first mark on the land here, official mark on the land. And the reason it's there is that that was the boundary of the Hastings Mill timber lease. So we couldn't go over there because that was private property. So Vancouver, or Gastown, starts right here, goes that way to 6 blocks Canby Street, up to Hastings Street. That was the new metropolis. So they gave it the most boring name possible. They called it Granville, after the British Foreign Secretary. No one called it Granville because, of course, the character that sort of ran the place, Captain John Dayton, nicknamed Jack, could talk your ear off given any chance, and so he was known in Victorian slang as a gasser. So if you lived around the saloon, then you lived in Gassy's town, and he was known as Gassy Jack, and that gets shortened to Gastown. So that's where the name of the district comes from, and that's what everybody called it. Granville was almost never used, and even British Admiralty charts, even into the 1890s, when Vancouver had been established for like 16 years or so, they still put Gastown or Gassy's town on the Admiralty charts, and so it's a name that really, really stuck. So from there, Vancouver grows, and what really happens is 1871, so 1 year after our town site is surveyed, 1871, the colony of British Columbia decides, with great urging from the folks back east, that we should really join the Canadian Confederation. And so there's some hemming and hawing, because of course there are more Americans up here than there were, quote, Canadians. And so there was a real movement to sort of just join down that way, because, well, heck, they bought Alaska, Washington State's right there, so it would be real easy if we just joined there. And that was one of the real reasons why there's a big push to get us to join the folks back east. So of course the big promise was, if you join us, we'll build a train out to your territory. So that seemed to be a reasonable thing, so we joined the Confederation, and Port Moody at the end of the Burrard Inlet was of course the terminus point. Well, everyone, I think, back in 1871, 1872 already knew that Port Moody would not cut it as the terminus, because the inlet gets very narrow up there, and there's not a huge amount of land for expansion, and the harbor itself is navigable but not massive. And the railway directors, as they started building the line across the country, realized that everyone already knew that Port Moody was the terminus point, so all the real estate speculators had gone out and bought everything around that whole area. And one of the directors complained in a memo to the general manager that Port Moody is an unsuitable terminus because there is no opportunity to make money. Everyone already owns everything. So this is where they start hatching plans to bring in something called the English Bay Extension, or the English Bay branch line, and this is the line that comes into Vancouver. Now there was a court case once they announced that. Port Moody and everybody sued the CPR for bringing a branch line in, and that case didn't get settled until sometime in the 1890s, where the legality of building the line was actually clarified. But what it meant was that it shifted the entire focus away from Port Moody, and by consequence away from New Westminster and down to this end of the inlet, where there was actually nothing except a sawmill and a saloon and a 6-block